Tapes from New Jersey, it's the SNL Nerds, the show where two comics from New Jersey nerd out about Saturday Night Live. I'm your co-host, Darren Patterson.
And I'm your co-host, John Trumbull.
John Trumbull, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited because we have an exciting guest on the podcast with us today.
Yes, we have an amazing guest with us today. She's the articles editor of The New Yorker, former editor-in-chief of The New York Observer, original editor of Spy Magazine, one-time features director of Vogue. Just came out with her first book, this amazing book, Lorne, the man who invented Saturday Night Live, all about Lorne Michaels. Just hit the New York Times bestseller list. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Susan Morrison.
Hello. So nice to be here with the nerds.
Thank you so much for joining us, Susan. This is very exciting. We were very excited when we heard about your book, and Darren had, when he found out that you were having a signing near him, he made a point of hightailing it out there and inviting you over. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's been enlightening and fascinating how keen people are to talk about Lorne Michaels, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And usually when we have a guest on, we kind of ask our guest, if they are indeed an SNL nerd or are they like a casual fan. But I mean, in your case, I know that's not the case because you are a diehard SNL fan.
I might be something even more boring. I mean, I'm a scholar. I'm an SNL pedant. But yeah, I mean, I remember the first show. You know, I was in high school. I've watched it the whole time. I don't know if I would have thought of myself as a geek. I mean, I did go to the show in the first season and saw an Elliot Gould show, which was completely thrilling. And I think a lot of the stuff that happened on the show, a lot of the jokes probably went right over my 16-year-old head. But I did fully twig to just the excitement of the live television experience and the cameras swooping over your head on cranes and all that. And then, you know, almost randomly, like 7 years after that, I briefly worked for Lorne Michaels on this show that he was doing during his hiatus from SNL called The New Show. And so I was 23, but I met, a lot of the kind of Lorne Michaels team then, a lot of the important writers who would go on to stay with him for decades, like Jim Downey and Jack Handey and George Meyer and Steve Martin and Alan Zweibel and all of those guys. So all those people have been in my life now for 40 years. So I guess, I don't know, that makes me an SNL nerd. It makes me kind of SNL adjacent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that must have been really helpful when you started putting this book together. And it's been sort of a long gestation process, from what I understand, because you got the idea after the 40th anniversary special, right?
Yeah, I mean, and then I started, I sold the book. I wrote a proposal and I sold the book right then. And in my proposal, I made it clear that I was very familiar with Lorne's world and knew a lot of his people and knew him a bit, but I did not promise that I had his access to him. It is not what is technically called an authorized biography.
Mm-hmm.
But that lingo is very strange in the publishing business. I mean, I think people think of an authorized biography as something that's almost like a vanity project that the subject wants to be written about. And the thing about Lorne is that, I think he would have done anything to make this book go away. He likes to be behind the curtain. And so when I went to him after selling the book and I said, Lorne, I just sold a book, just signed a contract to write a book about you and the show. I don't need anything from you. But if you wanted to sit down and talk to me, it'd be a better book, and it would better reflect your legacy. And, that was a real moment for him because, of course, he would rather have just stayed in the shadows. I think he would have preferred me to just, move to Tibet or something rather than write a book. But, and he looked like he was going to have a heart attack. But then I think, we talked some more and I think he realized, he knew me, he liked the New Yorker where I work. And I think he felt like, oh, well, if this is going to be inflicted on me better it be Susan Morrison than some, entertainment business hack. And I think it was almost reassuring to him that it took me so long.
Right.
Maybe part of him thought, gee, maybe she'll never finish it. But um, no, I interviewed him about 50 times over many years,
Wow.
and
Wow.
we really developed a very comfortable rapport. And he was into it. I mean, we still talk on the phone now. I think we miss talking to each other.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it is interesting to think that because like Lorne is somebody who is, isn't in public eye, people know him, but there is still so much that's not known about him, like, his childhood or even his adolescence years. Like, I didn't even know that he lost his father at such a young age till I saw it in the Saturday Night Movie. I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, that totally shocked me. I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's such a key building block to his personality, and I would say even his management style, his producing style.
Hmm.
He I mean, this it starts to get heavy and Freudian here, but he had a big argument with his father one night when he was 14, and that night his father collapsed with a heart attack, and Lauren never saw him again. He went away to
Hmm.
the hospital for 2 weeks. No one told him what was going on. They said, well, Daddy will be home soon, and then he died. And so that produced in Lorne this terror of confrontation.
Hmm.
And for years he would never I mean, he still doesn't. He doesn't get into an argument with anybody. He doesn't yell. When there's something confrontational that needs to be done, he delegates it. It used to be his manager Bernie Brillstein who would have these difficult conversations. Now it tends to be Steve Higgins. But he doesn't get in there and fight with people or get emotional. It's too dangerous for him. And I think that that's, sort of manifested as a slight remoteness, which is one of his most effective tools in
Hmm.
making people work hard for him.
Yeah, because he's I think generally regarded as still this inscrutable figure, which is just kind of fascinating when you consider that he's been in the public eye to one degree or another for 50 years now.
Yes, I mean, he doesn't, he plays his cards close to the vest. He doesn't give up that much. And which is why, all through my book, there are all these descriptions of these little hierarchical protocols, like which cast members and staffers get invited to the Tuesday night dinner with a host.
Hmm.
Everyone, Will Ferrell told me that, if you didn't get invited, it could ruin your week. Everyone's paying attention to sort of who gets time with the king. Um,
Mm.
and I know that, I think that Odenkirk or Sandler maybe told me about how, like Chris Farley, when he was on the show, he already was struggling with drugs and alcohol. And, Lorne would call him into his office to talk to him about this, basically to read him the riot act, to say he had to
Hmm.
get back together. And Farley was so excited at being called into Lorne's office, time alone with the boss, that he could hardly process that he was being reprimanded.
Wow.
So there's still, people really cherish their one-on-one time with him because it's not, it's not that easily obtained. And
Hmm.
a lot of people have told me they have a very distinct memory of the first after party where they were invited to sit at Lorne's table and talk to him. It's not something that people just casually do. They don't just plop themselves down next to him.
Wow.
Yeah, that's something else. I mean, I'm still in the process of reading the book, but it's fascinating the way you kind of show how the path to SNL just kind of gradually came together for him. Like he's even though he was very young when he started the show, he still like spent a few years uh, paying his dues, as it were, and he sort of gradually meets all these people who kind of come back to the show again later on. And it's just fascinating seeing it all gradually come together like that.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite part of the book and the research, and other friends who are biographers tell me the same thing, that, what's really fascinating is what goes on before your character walks onto the world stage, because
Hmm.
once they're in the in the limelight. The media has covered them to some extent. I mean, Lorne less than others, but what nobody knows is what happened before they got famous, before they became a bold-faced name. And Lorne in particular, he really bounced around a lot of strange, undistinguished Hollywood jobs, thought of throwing in the towel numerous times. He worked on like the Perry Como Christmas special and
Mm-hmm.
Phyllis Diller variety show. And, he was this cool guy who, smoked pot and had his long hair wrapped in a hippie headband and everything. And when he went to Hollywood for his first TV job, he found that his colleagues were these guys in their 50s who had worked in radio, and he thought, oh my God, television is this hopeless backwater. And he kept thinking he had made the wrong decision. He looked at the movies, and you had Terrence Malick and Robert Altman and Scorsese making these amazing arty films, and in music, you had the Stones and David Bowie, and television was kind of stuck in the 50s. So, but the thing that I thought was so interesting as his biographer was that no matter how grim the job or the situation he got himself into, he always learned something from it. He always took away a lesson, and he was very careful to kind of make all these mental notes as he went along. And one that I love is his first job in Hollywood was working for Phyllis Diller at this cornball variety show. And back then, this was in the 60s, audiences weren't used to seeing a woman as the host of the show. And Lorne said that the producers could tell early on that it made the audience uncomfortable to have this woman be in charge. And she was kind of an abrasive woman. So they had this idea that a way to kind of soften her up for the audience, to make her more approachable, was they would start the show with a segment where she was just sitting down and interviewing some of her celebrity guests, almost like a fireside chat, a sort of very cozy moment. And one of Lorne's jobs was to pre-interview these celebrities. They were people like Vidal Sassoon and Rudy Gernreich, the inventor of the topless bathing suit. And Lorne would interview these people and then type up questions for Phyllis. So here's the lesson there. You can draw a direct line between those Phyllis Diller interviews and the fact that SNL begins with an opening monologue from the host. Because the host is a Hollywood person. A lot of times they're not comedians, they're not familiar with live television, they're kind of stressed. The audience doesn't really know them. Like let's say you're an action star, the audience doesn't know how you're going to fare doing sketch comedy. So the reason Lorne always wanted to have the host monologue was the same reason that they did that thing with Phyllis Diller, so that the host would come out as himself, talk to the audience in a sort of a loose, personal way, put the audience at ease, And so, but I just think it's interesting that, at like 28, this is something that Lorne is sort of jotting down in his mental log, like, oh, you have to make the audience comfortable with the celebrity. And there are countless other examples like that of things he took away from his grim early jobs.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was really interesting, and you made the point that, like, as you say, like, success has a thousand fathers, and that there are a lot of sort of origin stories for the SNL format. Like, partly it came from the Phil Stiller show, partly it came from Laugh-In, which Lorne was a writer on for a year. I mean, do you put more credence in one of those theories?
Well, I mean, Lorne himself, when he was pitching this show for years to middle-aged executives whose eyes glazed over when he talked about it, he would describe it, what he wanted, as he would say, I want new wine in old bottles. And what he meant by that was that he believed in the old-fashioned variety show format. That went back to vaudeville. It was basically, you have some comedy, you have some music, you have a juggler, and he liked the variety show format. What he didn't like was how corny the content was. You know, he didn't think that the content of these shows was keeping up with the culture. I mean, as an example, like the Carol Burnett show, it was brilliant, you know, won Emmys every year. But, you know, the sketches were about PTA meetings and, you know, suburban, you know, garage doors getting stuck. I mean, they were about older people, more square people. Lorne wanted to put his generation's concerns. You know, he called himself his generation, the TV generation. They were the first group of people who'd grown up with television. He wanted to put their concerns on the air, you know, sex and drugs and rock and roll. He told me that when he met Lily Tomlin, one of the things that they bonded over was the way they both noticed that, like, if you watched a Bob Hope special, and you know, the Bob Hope writers were trying to be with it, and they wrote something about marijuana, and the characters in the sketch were supposed to be stoned. That the stoned characters, they would just act drunk because they didn't know what stoned was, you know.
Right.
So TV was so square, and so anyway, to go back to your original question, I think that there were, you know, there's a reason why, you know, George Schlatter, the producer of Laugh-In, thought that Lorne took it from Laugh-In. You know, Howard Shore, Lorne's friend from summer camp, thought that Lorne was influenced by the little variety shows that Howard and Lorne put on at camp. You know, his Canadian partner, Hart Pomerantz, thought that SNL was based on the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hour, which was a variety show that they did in Canada. But the fact is, all of these shows had basically the same kind of vaudevillian variety show format. Lorne's innovation was updating the content, you know, making it cool and self-referential, having rock music, you know, having jokes about eating disorders and drug problems and, you know, boyfriend problems and girlfriend problems. It was just way hipper than anything that you saw on the network.
Yeah. And was it tough for you to track down some of these older shows like the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hour or the Lily Tomlin specials? Because the way you write about it seems like you'd obviously seen most of them.
Yes. Well, yes, that's a good observation. The Lily specials are really, to my astonishment, not available. You know, that is groundbreaking work, you know, in terms of it's feminist, and it's really funny. It's very interior. You know, Lorne always talked about Lily Tomlin as having established a kind of what he called comedian's lib. She sort of liberated comedy from the punchline, you know, and from like aggressive male punchy humor. There are 4 of those specials, and Lily, she burned me DVDs and sent them to me, and that's how I saw them. So I have them. And I wanted to watch them. I spent a day with her at her house in LA interviewing her, and I wanted to see them before I talked with her. So she sent them to me. And I just can't believe that those aren't available on some streamer. You know, they really should be. So yeah, I had to work to get those. And then the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hours, there are some snippets available on YouTube that you can watch. But I also spent some time in Canada with Hart Pomerantz, who had a whole archive of stuff that he played for me, and that was really fun. You know, if you can get into the CBC archives, they're findable there. I think you have to go in person. Another great thing that Hart Pomerantz played for me, which was it's a little page of the book that I'm especially fond of. Years before SNL, Lorne and his comedy partner Hart, they sold jokes to other comedians. They sold jokes to Joan Rivers and various other people. And they did at one point get matched up with Woody Allen, whose agent, Jack Rollins, thought Woody needed some help writing jokes because he was so overbooked. So they went down to Woody Allen's house on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and they sat in his living room with him for hours trying to write a joke. Woody came up with a premise. Okay, the joke is a lobster in a tank at a restaurant. But the thing that was this is a real, you know, striking gold for a biographer. Can you imagine? Hart Pomerantz had tape recorded that whole session. So I just got to listen to Woody, Hart, and Lorne, doing the boring, backbreaking work of trying to figure out a joke, just sitting in the living room. It was just incredible. It was
Oh, wow.
incredible. I wish I had an
Yeah.
audio component of my book that I could have included that tape, but I quoted
Yeah.
at length, and you really get a sense of, well, just first of all, the drudgery of writing jokes. And also,
Hmm.
you can see Lorne kind of leading the conversation, in his producer-ish way. He's the one who's like, well, no, how about if there's a clam who's mad at him?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it was a real revelation.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm glad. That's amazing that you got to interview all these amazing people like Lily Tomlin and whatnot. And from what I understand, you also got a chance to talk to Buck Henry and Herb Schlosser before they
Yes.
passed. Is there anybody else that you didn't get a chance to talk to, or
Well,
anything like that? Or
I mean, I wanted to talk to Dick Ebersol, who plays a large part in the beginning of SNL. At the time that I reached out to him, he declined because he was working on his own memoir, and I think
Mm.
he just didn't want to give up any of that material. I mean, as it happened, he's a faster writer than I am, so his book came out. But
oh,
I quoted from his book,
Okay.
but I understood him not wanting to talk to me. And then the only other
Yeah.
person, and this is, I think, just kind of a funny story, because there wasn't anybody who said no. And I did
Oh,
make a
that's
point
terrific.
of getting to the older people first. I mean,
Yes.
I knew Buck 40 years ago at the new shows, but I went to see him in LA. He had had a stroke, so he was moving slow, but he was brilliant and helpful. And I cherish that afternoon I spent with him. And I spent a lot of time talking to Herb Schlosser, who so quick and smart. And I'm very pleased in this book to have been able to restore, just give him the credit he deserves in getting that show on the air and even coming up with so many of the original, details of how the show was to be taped. I mean, he's the one who wanted it to be live. He's the one who wanted it to be
Yeah.
in New York. He's the one who wanted it to have rotating hosts. Um, but the other story about the person I didn't get to talk to, I was really blessed in this project in largely managing to avoid publicists.
Oh, yes.
Lorne
Yeah.
was just talking to me directly. Like I would just text Lorne and figure out when I could come over to see him. And I think that in terms of most of the other cast members and writers, one would give me someone's email and I would just write to them. And they must have figured that since Lorne was talking to me, it was safe. So I didn't have to go through all the nightmarish red tape with people's publicists. One publicist that I did talk to, I can't remember her name, but Andy Samberg had this publicist who I was working with on some other New Yorker related story. And I knew she was Andy's publicist, and so since we were in contact, I said, oh, by the way, I'd love to talk to Andy Samberg for the book I'm writing. I've talked to X, Y, and Z. And she said, sure. But then she just never delivered him. It was like he could never do it. And, for all I know, the publicist never even told Andy Samberg about it. And I
Yeah.
kind of feel bad for him in retrospect that he's like the one guy who's not in the book, but that's because his publicist was such a dope.
oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. I can sympathize with that greatly because I've done like a few oral history type projects, and yeah, going through publicists for some of the more famous people is that can be headache inducing. So yeah,
Right.
I'm so happy for you that you managed to dodge that bullet for the most
I
part.
mean, one funny thing is that, I wrote the book and just with my New Yorker background, I hired a fact checker, one of our amazing fact checkers, to just nail down, double check all the really important stuff because I didn't want there to be any errors.
Hmm.
And sometimes she would contact these people's publicists, to check them. And the publicists were like, what? Talk to who? Like they just, because
Yeah.
they had, it alarmed them that their clients were talking to me without them giving permission.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, for one voice actor I interviewed, I had to go back and forth with her publicity team for literally a month for like a what turned out to be a 30-minute interview.
yes.
So, yeah, it gets quite draining.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's kind of a relief to, I'm sure, talk to people like the writers who probably don't have publicists, and you can just like reach out to them
Well, some of
directly.
them
And
do too, but no,
yeah,
I mean, everyone, the thing about Lorne is that, as I say numerous times in the book, they all love to talk about Lorne. They
hmm
all, you know, uh, um, oh, I just forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, it was a very common thing for me to sit down with somebody, turn the tape recorder on, and they'd say, I don't know if I really have that many anecdotes about Lauren. I'm not sure I have that
right,
much to say. And then, like 3 hours later, the person would be sobbing. You know,
wow,
it was
Wow.
very. I mean, the attachment to Lauren goes so deep in these people, and I think it's a few different things. It's for the most part, they met him, he hires these people when they're very young.
hmm
So this thing about it, this guy who's opening the whole world to you. He's really changing their lives. And so of course they project a lot onto him and a lot of kind of father figure stuff. And I think that he ends up having this enormous emotional hold on them that I think is sometimes, he recognizes it as almost a burden. I mean, he needs to keep some boundaries. He
right,
told me in the first 5 years, Belushi would show up in his apartment in his lobby at 3:30 in the morning. Um, so I think that's why, but they do like to talk about him. And of course, the other bonus for me as the biographer is that, Lorne himself is a great talker, but all the people that he hires, of course, are very smart and very articulate and very funny. So there isn't a dud interview among them. Everything
yeah.
is good.
That's
Well,
fantastic.
I mean, you did all this extensive research and interviews for years and years and years. What surprised you the most over the course of writing this book? What was like the biggest discovery, or you're like, oh my God, I had no idea about that?
Oh boy. Wow, that's a good question. I guess I was surprised just in Lorne himself to see how after so many decades he still is so invested in it. There's not
hmm
a scintilla of a feeling of him phoning it in. One of the writers, a guy in his 20s, told me that it was it was a revelation to him to see how after doing this for so many years that like on a Saturday morning or a Friday, that Lauren can still seem scared. He's still like
hmm
scared. Do we have a show? Is it going to be okay? And, there's none of that kind of doing it with one hand tied behind his back. Like he's so fully invested in it. I found that so inspiring. And I think that they all know it. If they thought
Mhm.
that he didn't really care, then they wouldn't really care.
Yeah, no, it's
Right.
fascinating. I mean, I know it's a thing where it's beautiful to hear that still has he cares about the show still at this age, and he still has so much invested in it. I know he's at that age now where people are talking about, oh, is he going to retire? Who would take over?
hmm
I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast a little bit, but yeah, it's one of the things where it's like, could anybody else do it? Could anybody else step in his shoes and do it? I
I
still don't
think of
know.
course people like could, but I don't. I think it's more a question of like should. Like
hmm
I think that Lawrence, the key to Lorne is his taste. That he has amazing taste, not just in comedy and sketches, and but in like, in loafers and armchairs and paintings and
hmm
vacation spots. But he has this singular taste, and it really matters to them to have his approval. So even if somebody just who was younger than him and had the same values, it just wouldn't be the same. And I mean, my theory is that I really don't think he has any interest in retiring. He loves the show. He's married to the show. He's
hmm
never missed a single show in all the years he's produced it. He's never been home with the flu. He's always there. So I could imagine, rather than being replaced, a situation where his studio duties are dialed way back. There are two times during the week when his input and his eye are essential, and that is Wednesday after the read through. The whole
hmm
cast and writer's room, and his whole staff gathers, smushed into this little room, and they read 4 hours worth of sketches. And then after that, Lorne and a few deputies pick 10 or 12 to go forward. And that moment, his brain is really key there. And then the next time is Saturday when he's watching the dress rehearsal and listening to what the audience responds to and making a million last minute decisions about what to cut, what to change, what to tweak, changing the order. And that is the time of the week where his real superpowers come out, and no one could do what he does. So I could imagine that he could, stay home, do whatever he wants, come into the office Wednesday afternoon, come into the office Saturday evening. And I could see him doing that for 10 more years. And he has this very, very able squad of deputies for brilliant younger people: Aaron Doyle, Carolyn Maroney, Eric Kenward, and Steve Higgins. And they can handle everything else. So that would be my vision of it, rather than having no Lorne at all.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, another thing I really liked about the book is that the way it's structured, like the way it's broken down till Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the days of the week, and you kind of go through the regular week leading up to Saturday night, leading up to the show. And then you also put in stories about Lorne and kind of fill in his backstory and everything. Like, what made you decide to choose that type of format?
Yeah, well, after I had been reporting for a couple of years and talking to Lorne a lot, I started thinking about, how the book would feel to a reader. And I realized that I wanted, to the wider to the everyone who knows Lorne, everyone in the comedy business, they know that Lorne is this Wizard of Oz kind of obsessive, reclusive oddball. They want to know more about it. But I realized that the general reading public doesn't know that. So the first thing I thought was, okay, I need to figure out a way how within the first 10 pages of this book, I'm going to alert the reader that this is that kind of a character who everyone is obsessed with, and sort of make sure it's clear that the stakes are high. So that was the first thing. And I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. Then I also started thinking, as I was reporting, like, okay, every biography suffers from this plodding feeling at times, that it's just, the phrase I use is like death march through the years. And, because Saturday Night Live is broken into seasons, I thought that the risk was that could even be worse, like 1980 turns into 1981, and then the 1982 season. And I just thought, gee, I don't want it to have that plodding feeling. So, and here's where my background as a magazine journalist comes in handy. I love stories that bring the reader like right into the room with the people, and you can see what the couch feels like, and smell the popcorn and hear what people are saying and see what they look like, and it's more immersive. So I said to Lorne, I said, listen, what would really help is if I could just come for a week and literally just be at your elbow as you do everything. So I have a really clear idea of how the show actually happens. And I knew that would be really interesting to readers too. So I did that. And, that was the first thing I wrote. I wrote Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It was 50,000 words. And then only then I had the idea, like, okay, I'm going to break this into pieces. The first chapter is going to be Monday. So Monday, you set the scene. It's like, it's really immersive. The reader is right in Lorne's office with him. You get a sense of the tension. You get a sense of the stakes. And then chapter 2 is 1944 in Toronto, when Lorne is born, which is, quieter. I mean, not boring, but you know what I mean? It's a little bit more scholarly. So then the Days of the Week chapters, someone told me it's called a braided narrative. They weave through the narrative of Lorne's life. And what I hadn't counted on, but as I was writing it, I was seeing how this was working, and it was getting very exciting, that because the pace picks up at the show every day, every day is faster than the day before it, and every day is more tense. And by Wednesday or Thursday, it begins to feel like the Hunger Games. Everything is like, is my sketch going to get on? Am I going to get on? Am I going to get cut? So by Saturday, there's this sort of knife edge of tension and adrenaline. And by having those days woven through the biographical information, it's like this propulsive force that drives you to the end of the book. I don't mean to be patting myself on the back, but I love hearing people tell me that when they're reading the Saturday chapter, like their heart is racing,
Oh,
are they
yeah.
going to make it? Are they going to get on the air? So that ended up it was almost an accident, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out. It also means that I got to write in two sort of different styles, because when you're writing those scenes of the days, it's more of a, I don't know if you're familiar with Lillian Ross, who was like one of the great New Yorker journalists who I edited for the last 20 years of her life, and was a friend and a real mentor and role model for me. But those sections are written almost like little plays. There's a lot of dialogue, and you really get to know all the characters. And so that writing is a very different kind of writing than just writing historical narrative.
Right.
And
yeah. Because you were there, you were shadowing.
I was in the room. I was in
them.
the room.
So it has that immediacy to it.
Yeah.
And you were shadowing them during a week that Jonah Hill hosted, and apparently that was like a very eventful week because Alec Baldwin ended up getting arrested at one point during that week, even though I don't think he was scheduled to be on the show, right?
Right. But of course, no, it was a great week. Alec got arrested. It was for punching someone over a parking place. So, it was comedy rather than tragedy, let's just say. And there was a little bit of an ongoing discussion all week about, are we going to reference Alec's arrest in Weekend Update? And, many people were saying, well, if we don't, it'll look like we're protecting him. And do we, and so they had to figure out how to make it, but the show is great at doing moments that are sort of insidery, self-referential moments.
Yeah.
So in the end, and they didn't figure this out until Saturday night, what they did was there was a parody Fox news broadcast as the cold opening. And so they had Laura Ingraham, the Fox host, saying, up next, disgraced former actor Alec Baldwin, gets in a brawl or something. So they got to poke fun at Alec, but because they were having it be in the voice of Fox News, there was some insulation. But so it was just fascinating to be able to see how they unraveled the different little problems as they came up. Everything from there was, at first, Jonah Hill wanted a sketch in that made reference to the movie he had just directed called Mid-90s. But Lorne recognized that was like a really art house, little indie movie that almost nobody had seen.
Right. I think you said it was like in 2 theaters at the time or something like that.
At one point, Lorne says to his group, he says, how many people have seen Mid-90s? And somebody cracks, maybe in the mid-90s, So, and Lorne is very aware that his audience, as he likes to say, you've got audience in all 50 states. People are watching from all over the place. It's 6 million people. So you can't be doing abstruse little insidery things. But nobody's shot that idea down at the start. They let Jonah write it. They let it go through the paces, and it just kind of died a natural death. But it was seeing all of that talent handling up close that was fascinating, because Lorne is just a master at kind of, he would never tell somebody that's not funny or that's a bad joke or that's not working. But he would sort of say, well, what do you think? Do you think it's funny? And just sort of guide them to the conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he's kind of the master handler at that sort of thing. And you point out that so much of the structure of the show, too, is like, we have to assure the host we're in good hands. And so Monday they're sitting in the meeting with all the cast and writers. Tuesday they go out to dinner with Lorne and, certain select members of the staff. and just kind of like, hey, we're on your side.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's again, think about the Phyllis Diller thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he he learned early on that you want to make the audience comfortable, but you also want to make the host comfortable.
Right.
Um, and like, there's a part of it that's hospitality, even. He said that on Monday, the thing you're most worried about is the host bolting. you know,
Yeah.
because these people, they come in, and celebrities are not used to the loss of control that the show
Mm-hmm.
involves. They're used to everything going their way and getting their own way. I mean, people have described hosting the show to like jumping out of an airplane.
Mm.
Um, you have to just do it on faith. And yeah, Candice Bergen just said, yeah, you feel like you're just being wheeled around,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very, if you're like a big movie star, it's a big change.
Yeah. I mean, because most of them are really stepping outside of their comfort zones. I
Yes,
mean, because
yes.
just the
And
live
then for the
component
ones
and
also
yeah.
who aren't natural at comedy,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people do the show because they want to try to broaden their appeal in the eyes of the public. They want to
Right.
seem funny, but if they're not really funny, that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading like I know like a lot of actors are kind of scared of doing SNL. I think like Chris Evans even famously said, "Yeah, they asked me to do it a couple times, but I don't want to do it because it's just so terrifying."
People describe it just being, yeah, just totally terrifying. And you really do have to, you give up. I mean, yes, they ask you which sketches you want to do and everything, and they won't force you to do one that you don't want, but you really are in these other people's hands. And I think
Right.
when you're a giant movie star, you're not used to that. One of the things I loved hearing about, when I was there, is they would reminisce about the time Trump hosted in
Mm-hmm.
2016, and they were all shocked. He was the candidate at that point. They were all shocked that he didn't come with any kind of a handler, to vet the material. Like when Oprah
Mm-hmm.
Winfrey hosted, she came with all these people from the NAACP who said, don't do this, don't do that, don't play Aunt Jemima, that kind of thing.
Wow.
So Trump comes in, he doesn't have anybody there. So, like, they were shocked that he agreed to do a sketch which showed him, being, what's the word I'm looking for? Being endorsed by a bunch of porn stars.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then they
You also
described
talked about the Giving Tree
yes,
sketch.
yes, yes. I was just going to
Yeah.
say they described this sketch that they loved, which was Trump. The Giving Tree is based on the Shel Silverstein children's book about the tree whose stumps are cut down one by one, to sort of help people out until he's just, all his limbs are cut off and he's just a stump. And Trump plays a
Mm-hmm.
tree standing next to the Giving Tree, and he calls the Giving Tree a sucker. And
Right.
apparently it was really, really funny. Everyone loved it, but Trump, in the end, refused to do it because he thought that having his head stick out of a hole in a tree trunk costume made him look fat.
Oh wow.
Anyway,
It all comes down to his ego, I guess.
sometimes the stories about the stuff that doesn't get on the air are funnier than the stuff that did get on the air.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, you've gotten such a rare insight into how the show is done, because not too many people have been able to shadow Lorne and the cast and crew for an entire week. The only other person I can think of offhand was James Franco when he
Right.
was doing his documentary about it. Has that changed the way you see the show now? Do you watch it in a
I
different way?
guess I think it has. I mean, I think, very occasionally they've let somebody like from 60 Minutes or somebody, film
Mm-hmm.
the meeting between dress and air or something like that, film the dress rehearsal. But what I realized was so unique about what I got to see, it's like what I was referring to earlier about the mid-90s sketch, like being there from the first day. You
Yeah.
could sort of see what the little issues were going to be, and you could see them develop and bubble over and change. And Monday, as you say, it's sort of everyone being very solicitous of the host. It's like, whatever you want, Jonah, what do you want to do? And by Saturday, it's pretty, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, it was pretty much like, shut up, Jonah. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but just to see, you could just see that the development of it over a week was really fascinating. And that was,
Mm-hmm.
and also to see how among Lorne's own employees, and they're all in any given season, there are people who who are kind of dubbed the resident Lornologists,
Mm-hmm.
people who really understand what he's thinking and how to persuade him of this and how to, and so even to see the deputies and the writers when they're not with Lorne, kind of trying to game, well, maybe if we pitch it this way, he'll like it. And maybe we'll, just seeing all the little strands come together was the diplomacy involved, was
Yeah.
fascinating.
I mean, and during that course of shadowing him during the week, were you surprised by which sketches ended up making it to air? Was there like a sketch you heard about early in the week? You're like, oh, well, this
Yeah,
is definitely gonna.
I have gone to a bunch of different read-throughs, weeks when I wasn't kind of embedded. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always shocked. Like there were always one or two things that I thought, wow, that killed. And then I just couldn't believe it didn't make it ever, the various Trump sketches and other things. Um, now I'm trying to remember. There were definitely things that I thought were really funny that didn't get picked. What I remember more is, in the book, there's this sketch that ends up getting cut called Montreal Motorcycles, which is this very weird thing about three Canadian guys taking a motorcycle ride to see fall foliage. And I guess the joke is that they're kind of very philosophical and they're speaking, they're quoting poetry, and yet they're riding these huge Harley Davidsons.
Mm-hmm.
And I just never thought that one was like that funny. I mean, it had a lot of visuals. And so I was kind of surprised that one even made the cut and people were very keen on it. Uh, it ended up getting scrapped at the last minute, and it must have cost thousands of dollars. The motorcycles, the leather outfits, the green screen footage of the fall foliage. So, but I think that I don't know, So yeah, anytime I went to read through the picks, wouldn't have lined up with my picks. But then I'm not a professional comedy writer,
Right. Right.
Absolutely. All right. Well, here let's ask a question. We put out the word that we were doing this interview, and we got a question from Matt Levy, and Matt asked, "What was your favorite story that didn't make it into the book?" So, yeah, do you have a story that,
Oh
for whatever
gosh,
reason?
I have so many. I mean, I wrote this book originally twice as long. Judd Apatow really is begging me to give him the director's cut. He really wants to. I'm trying to. Gosh, I hope I don't come up empty, because there definitely are things. Oh God, they're all got. Well, okay, here's one. I don't think it was in the book. Because when you're cutting, what the reason you cut sometimes is like, let's say you have three great anecdotes and they're all illustrating the same overall point, so you just have to
Right.
cut a couple of them. So this is one. I don't think this is in the book. It's one that Bruce McCulloch, the great Canadian actor and writer who was who was in The Kids in the Hall,
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
told me
And he wrote for the show
he wrote for the
too.
show in 1986, and this was so basically he wrote a sketch, and Joan Cusack was in the cast. Joan Cusack was in it, and she played a school teacher. And one of Lorne's sayings, comedy rules that he says all the time, is "do it in sunshine."
Mm.
What he means by that is that you always have to remember that comedy is supposed to be an entertainment. People should look, attractive people should look attractive. Costumes should be bright colors. You want it to just be sort of sunny. You don't want it to be like dark and indie and people wearing dirty sweatshirts and black and white and stuff like that. So anyway, so Bruce wrote this sketch, and in dress rehearsal, Joan Cusack came out in some kind of a very frumpy dress as the school teacher. And Lorne's note under the bleachers at dress rehearsal was, why does she have to look so drab? She's a beautiful woman. Well,
Mm-hmm.
give her a better costume or something. And Bruce got so mad that he turned to Lorne and he said, okay, Lorne, I'll put her in a fucking bikini. And so, and Bruce said, I can't believe I didn't get fired that second, because he realized that it was a very impudent thing to say. But also, I think he also saw Lawrence's point. I mean, Joan Cusack
Mhm.
is great looking. Why not have her looking great,
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
school teacher? And but everyone had little stories like that. And Bruce's was, yeah, he recognized that he was being sort of a jerk. And I think writers can find Lawrence notes annoying, but they all really do make sense, And that's what
Right.
Bruce was saying, that his takeaway from that is, sure, of course, it would be nicer for the audience if she looked great,
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, I guess as an artist, you always have to be a little bit protective of your work, and like whenever somebody comes with a critique, you can, your first instinct is to
Right,
just defend it, just like
right, right.
So, I mean, this book had such a long gestation period, like literally like 10 years, uh,
Yeah.
from beginning to end. How did you like keep yourself motivated and energized for such a long process? Was there any point while you were writing this book where you were just like, oh my God, I'm never going to finish this
Yeah,
thing?
I despaired. I mean,
Yeah,
there were two things. Well, three things. I mean, because first of all, I have a very demanding day job at the New Yorker,
I'm
where I've
sure.
been for
Yeah.
almost 30 years. And I got a few months off at the beginning when I was starting the reporting, but I have been doing this job consistently through this whole thing. And that meant working every weekend, getting up early and working. It was tough. It was a real drain. And I also, I mean, this is the inspirational part. I was never one of those editors who secretly wanted to be a writer. I really like being an editor. I like being the big picture person and working with
Hmm.
the writers. So even deciding to write a big book like this was kind of jumping off a cliff for me. But I sort of thought, what the hell, let's do this. I'm an empty nester. I just said, let's try this new thing because I haven't ever really
Hmm.
identified myself as a writer. So then about halfway through, I just thought, oh my God, what have I gotten into? This is so hard. And the hard part was, well, first of all, just sometimes just writing the sentences was hard,
Yeah.
it was so much material to digest. But also, I think I hadn't quite reckoned with how a book about Lorne Michaels's life would by necessity be a book about the history of show business, and even an
Mm.
intellectual history of the past 60 years about politics and show business and society. So, and I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm a perfectionist. I mean, I have a very high bar in terms of, how good it had to be. So
Hmm.
I did find myself thinking, what have I got myself into? Will I ever finish this? But I just, when I would get into those moods, I just said, okay, I'm just going to focus on today's work. I'm just, you just have to break it down and
Yeah.
sometimes even break it down into even smaller segments. Like I have one writer friend, I mean, a writer I've been editing for years, who said, well, you take your kitchen timer and you turn it on for an hour and you put it next to your computer and then you just don't do anything for that hour, but right, you don't look at emails, you don't answer your phone. And, I just had to learn all these new tricks. But I did, no, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, I really did despair. There were times that I just thought I wasn't going to get to the other side. Then I think what happened is you'll note, I mean, anyone who's read the book notes that there's a lot of attention and space devoted to the creation of SNL, the first
Hmm.
year. And so I guess when I was despairing, I was thinking, oh my God, at this rate, I'll never finish. But then I realized after that, it sort of loosened up. And I realized, oh, this took so long and is so many pages because I'm building the house that the rest of the book will live in. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I set up the
Yeah.
institution of SNL. Once that was set up in the pages, you could move a little bit more quickly and almost thematically through the rest of the years.
Wow.
Hmm.
No,
So
that's a great point.
yeah, so then I also just figured out some ways, again, to avoid the death march through the years problem. The second half of the book is arranged a little bit more thematically, like the 9/11 chapter deals with politics in the show.
Hmm.
And then, then there's a chapter when, Lorne starts to produce 30 Rock, and I used that chapter to discuss a lot of the other shows that he produces and why he likes to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The chapter about him anointing Conan O'Brien as David Letterman's successor at late night becomes a chapter which is all about his adventures in late night, including Fallon and Seth Meyers, and the ultimately tragic situation of what happens when Conan goes to the Tonight Show. So it
Right,
it
right.
is those it's a little bit more thematic, and I think it probably moves along a little faster then.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten to that part of the book quite yet, but from what I understand from reading Bill Carter's The Late Shift, or I guess it was his second book, because the first
Yeah,
Late Shift book was about the Letterman
yeah.
Leno situation. Like part of the reason that the Tonight Show debacle with Conan happened the way it did was Conan kind of broke away from Lorne after he left late night and went to the Tonight Show.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very interesting bit of reporting because I mean, I love Bill Carter's books and I love Bill
Hmm.
Carter, and he has been such a lovely ally in this whole process, and it's so nice about this book. Um, because it has been oversimplified in the press.
Hmm.
It wasn't. NBC tried to put out this story that Conan and his producer Jeff Ross just said, "Oh, we don't want Lorne to executive produce the show."
Hmm.
They were kids. They really didn't know what they were doing, and they say that NBC said, "Oh, you don't want Lorne. He's on the East
Hmm.
Coast, we're on the West Coast. It's expensive," and they felt like they were at the grown up table for the first time. I think they listened to NBC. I mean, as Jeff, Conan's producer, said, we didn't throw ourselves in front of the truck for him. So when the time came, then Conan lost the Tonight Show. Lorne didn't throw himself in front of the truck for them. So I think
Right.
everybody feels bad about it. Everybody feels that it
Yeah.
was mishandled, but I don't think you can. I don't think it's as simple as pointing the finger at anybody. And Conan is, of course, not just one of the funniest people around, but really brilliant. I mean, I've known Conan since college.
Oh.
Oh
So,
wow.
we had he was very easy. He was just great to talk to. And I was happy to be able to, I believe, shed a little bit more light on that situation than has been, when you get to those chapters, you'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I look forward to reading that. I wasn't expecting to find out more about that situation, but yeah, I was fascinated by it when
Mhm.
reading both of Carter's books about it. So yeah, that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, really
So
fascinating. So yeah, I guess we're about to wrap it up here. But before we do, I don't know, just a little fun question. So, do you have a favorite era of SNL? Like, I know they usually say
Yeah.
your favorite era is whatever you grew up with in high school, but I was wondering if that applies to you, or do you have another era you really
I
enjoy?
have 2. I think I'm allowed 2. I have 2.
Okay, no,
okay,
go
One
for it.
yeah.
is, I love the great, Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks
Mm,
cast
Hmm.
of the late '80s. I think they were
Yeah.
just really wonderful. They had great writers then too, and those people had amazing chemistry together. But then I also love, 15 years later, the cast that was Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig and Fred Armisen. I think those people were just they had a kind of a coolness. I mean, that was like the
Hmm.
grooviest cast ever,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and they were a great ensemble. So those are my 2 favorite eras, I think. How about you guys?
no,
Well,
those are great choices.
yeah, that's pretty much it for us too. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, Darren and I were both Gen Xers, so we grew up on the Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, John Lovitz era, and that's when we first started watching the show on a regular basis. So we have that nostalgic affection for that, and yeah, and we're also big fans of the Bill Hader, Seth Meyers, Kristen Wiig era
Yeah.
as well.
And
So
I also really enjoy. The more I think about it, like I really did enjoy the Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Molly
Oh,
Shannon
yeah.
era as well. Like I think,
mhm,
Molly, yeah.
yeah, like they were really
yeah,
cooking with like Chris Kattan. If you watch him back then, he was like on another level with some of those
It's right.
performances.
That's true. And you know what? I kind of I think at the time I overlooked him because think about all the other
hmm,
giants in the cast. But when you see clips of him today, he's really something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, I mean, the characters like Mango and the. I mean, like he's just putting his all into it.
Yeah, like
I mean, it's just fearless.
Yeah, the Mr. Peepers character.
And Mr. Peepers, thank you. I was thinking like
just so physical, just raw energy, just on that stage with him.
Right.
And just and just totally unlike anything else you'd seen on the show before. So well, I mean. Thank you so much for this, Susan. This has been wonderful, and just like
thanks for being interested.
Yeah, and I love hearing about the process of this and putting this all together. I mean, because this is just a massive project. Like, how many interviews did you do altogether for this book?
I didn't count, but hundreds.
Wow. So I mean, and it is a really impressive piece of work, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm glad it's doing well. I understand it's a New York Times bestseller. So,
yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, again, all I ever wanted to do was finish it. So the success of it has been a real gravy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that was a helpful thing about the 50th was to, light a fire under you.
Complete accident, but boy, did it work for me.
It's fantastic. So everybody, go out and read this amazing book, Lorne, The Man Who Invented Saturday Night Live. I mean, if you're a SNL fan, I'd say it's a must read. If you're a comedy fan or a show business fan, like this is definitely something that you need to get into. Like you feel like you'll feel like you learn a little bit more about the man behind the curtain, as it were, reading this book. So wherever books are sold, go out and get a copy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that's our episode, guys. Thanks again for listening. As always, you could follow us on Blue Sky at SNL Nerds. You could follow us on our YouTube page, Non-Productive.com. And as always, you can follow me on all the social medias at Darren Credible, DARIN Credible.
And you can follow me on social media at Trumbull Comic. That's TRUMBULL and the word comic. Susan, is there anywhere that people can follow you?
I am just on Instagram at Sumolini, SUMOLINI.
Okay, well, we'll be sure to follow you over there and follow your other projects. Do you have any other book projects in the works that you can talk about?
Not right now. I'm still lying down.
When did you finally finish this book? When did you finally lock it in?
I guess I really turned it over to them last summer. It was a short runway, as my editor put it. Yeah.
Was there anything that came up in the time since it was locked in that you were just like, oh, I wish I could put that in there?
Really? I mean, not really. I continue to have Google alerts on about the show, but there was the Sky TV thing in the UK, but that's almost inevitable. No, I don't think any big things.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So you're not like frantically trying to add things for the paperback addiction.
Actually, one thing that I wish I had known, I just think it's funny, is that Prince Harry almost hosted the show. And this had already gone to press. Prince Harry was going to host the show when his memoir came out.
Oh, wow.
And I think it really was down to the wire. And I guess somebody in his camp decided that it was just too showbiz.
Wow.
Markle isn't pure showbiz. But anyway, I thought that would have been amazing to have Prince Harry host, right?
That would be fascinating, yeah. Wow. I mean, even if it was a great show or if it was a train wreck, it would be a memorable show either way.
Yeah. Well, I had didn't hear anything about that.
I would have put that in. Yeah, so here's our nugget of news. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
All right. Well, if you want to get more cool nuggets about that, please read Susan's book, Lorne, The Man Who Invented Saturday Night Live. It is a fascinating read. So thank you so much again for doing this. We really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So I guess that's it for this week's episode, or this bonus episode of the SNL Nerds. So thanks very much for listening, and we will see you next time with our regular episode as we cover the show. But until then, Nerds out!
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer, Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.